Welcome to the Introverted Doctor podcast, dedicated to uncovering myths, mistakes, and misconceptions that hold healthcare professionals back from having better interpersonal relationships with their patients and colleagues. In each episode, we focus on different aspects of a doctor's professional life, such as communication techniques, mindset routines, habits, and behaviors, with the goal to show how to eliminate anxiety, trip-ups, and unwelcome results that come from ineffective communications. I'll reveal research, routines, and have guests in future podcasts that will help shine light on a particular topic. I'll also have take-home summary tips you can apply right away to start living a fuller life at work, home, and play. I'm your host, Dr. Lalit Chawla, and in this episode, we talk about how to increase our ability to be more present with the people in our lives using simple and effective strategies. The show notes can be found on the website, theintroverteddoctor.com. If you're an introvert like me, you know we can certainly have a greater sense of awareness of our surroundings, greater attention to the people we are with, and also on what we're working on. That often translates into being a good listener, but that isn't always the case at all. And that can happen for a variety of reasons. One of the most important things I've had to learn personally and professionally was how to be more attentive and present with the people in my life more consistently. And that became even harder as more technology and apps became more accessible to my fingertips, because it was such a source of distraction until I learned how to set better parameters with it. I know that I'm very attentive with patients, my wife and kids, and my friends, hopefully most of the time, but then other times, well, not so much. And I've learned what works to increase that level of attentiveness. And if there's one thing I've learned from all the doctors I've met and worked with, is that they all want to learn to be more consistent at being present, and as a result, being a better listener, whether that be with their patients, colleagues, staff, or their family. Because isn't it true that the best doctors and communicators are really the best listeners? They're so focused, and you feel you are the only one they're paying attention to. The one attribute that is common with the best communicators, whether it's the doctor, nurse, teacher, occupational therapist, physiotherapist, is that they all have an incredible level of energy that is focused and that it's filled with so much presence. Because you know it's only possible to have that level of presence if you have that energy. Without good physical and mental energy, you can't be your best self. It's only when you have more energy that you can be more interested in what your children are doing. If you don't have energy, you just don't have the energy to hug your spouse, walk the dog, or even exercise. Because if you don't have energy, you just simply nod your head while your brain is essentially just turned off. So everything really comes down to how much energy we have and the quality of that energy we have. In other words, that it really is focused and it's not scattered like a firecracker going off, but rather steady and bright, like a little candle flame. Now, you've probably experienced this, because I know I have, because when I don't have energy, I don't interact with my kids, my wife, and my patients to the level that I want to. Thankfully, my teenage daughter's always quick to point out, that when I'm not paying attention, like when we go out for walks and she's telling me her story, what's happening in the day, I know I've been zoned out, and she is quick to put me back on task. So it's good when you have people like that in your life. So essentially, energy is the foundation of life and attentiveness and presence. And there are really two sides of the energy equation. And keeping our energy up and keeping our energy reserves high. There's only two things. One is how much energy is coming in, and what are we doing to replenish our energy? And the second factor is what is taking our energy away from us? And that's really it. There's only two sides to that equation. Now, as an introvert, I know that both sides are important because having time alone to rejuvenate myself and stay focused is really important for me. I know what works for me is to recharge my battery, and that is by, when I spend quiet time with myself, when I go for a walk, or I'm reading in silence, or building something in my workshop, or learning a new magic trick, or working on a hobby. And so if you're an introvert, you know exactly what I'm talking about having this quiet me time to restore that energy reserve. Now, I'd like to talk to you about the side of the equation that drains our energy. Short from being ill, energy drainage is not often a big source in our normal day-to-day life, but rather those little micro depleters or micro energy snatchers that are so little that they mostly go unnoticed. The little pinholes in the balloon that kind of lets the air out slowly, the little pokes that kind of nudges us off our pathway as we're trying to stay on path. Because that it's often the minutia things that can shift our attention. Little things that may look somewhat important, but in reality, they really aren't. And we know this inherently. I mean, if you look at pilots, they know the real importance of this is that if they're really off even by 1 degree in their flight path, that will put them in an entirely different destination altogether. I'm sure you've noticed this too. So here are a few simple tips based on research studies and practical experience that can elevate your energy and also prevent them from being depleted. Now, number 1, our phones can be wonderful in terms of being connected with important information and people, but it's also the primary source that can be the microscopic hits in our energy reservoir. Our phones allow us to check emails, receive texts, send texts, look at Facebook, Instagram, check the weather, book airline tickets, etc. And I'm willing to bet, because I've been guilty of this more often than I care to admit, that most of us look at our phone quite often during our busy day, whether in the clinic or in the hospital. Now, if I'm honest with myself, one reason I check my phone during the day is really to feed my need for variety or curiosity as to what else is happening in the world. The reality is, it's really not a whole lot of things that are significant and important. But those little pop-ups and checks and notifications actually drains our energy supply. We think we are multitasking, but it's really not effective at all. Studies have shown that high-end multitasking actually makes us less efficient when we're switching from one task to another, and that it takes several minutes to get refocused onto the original task that we're working on. Also, high-end media multitasking, in other words, doing many things at once, has a negative emotional consequences and also negative cognitive impacts that can actually create poorer performance. And we've seen that in cognitive tests over time when people who are engaged in that type of multitasking, it really creates negative consequences. You can read and download some of these research articles if you go to the introverteddoctor.com. Now, when I first read this, I didn't really believe that this was true and that really it didn't really apply to me. I thought, I could multitask, check my emails, answer texts, send a text, but I thought I would evaluate my efficiency in terms of the work I accomplished and my negative stress level that I was having. And so I decided to measure it. So I decided to simply, limit my tasks, that the little tasks throughout the day, and I just wouldn't text. And I thought I'll just time block it at lunchtime. And I turned off any social network apps that I was using. And I would create also mid-afternoon breaks. So instead of micromanaging the multimedia tasks through the afternoon, I allowed myself 10 to 15 minutes at 2:30 p.m. and at the end of the workday. And I basically measured, my performance. And what I found was that I was easily 50% more efficient, and I felt calmer by 30%. And most important was that I was more present with the people that I was working with, and whether it was patients, staff, colleagues, and it was just that much easier. I wasn't fighting against obstacles or my own distractions. So that's really an important aspect of managing that. Now, ever since I learned that fact and implemented that practice in my work life, I've been even more efficient and joyful at work and being able to handle the day-to-day duties that may not always be pleasant, like paperwork or, renewing prescriptions or things like that. And other colleagues that I've shared this with have also reported similar results. So take another look at your phone and email habits. Now, if you can leave your phone off your, physical person, that's even better. It's basically removing any temptation from you. But I realize as doctors, we sometimes, are connected to the hospital or other colleagues, so we need our phone. Try it for 2 to 3 weeks and see what happens. Measure it and take inventory of your inner psychology and efficiency. And if you're comfortable, ask people around you and get some feedback in terms of how you are overall. Do they find that you're even more, present and maybe even more pleasant to be around? So that's an important aspect of managing that little aspect. Number 2, in addition to what I was talking about, the other thing that really derails people's energy, especially if you're more of an introvert like myself, is having the little beeps and notifications on your phone that keeps going off randomly. Those little pop-up messages, beeps, and texts actually get your mind off track about what you're doing. Just like when you were in university and in writing exams. I mean, if you remember that time when you wrote exams in a big room, any little noise or cough or rustling used to annoy the heck out of us. And the reason was that we were so zoned in on what we were doing, and we were so focused, and that just kind of put us off. So shutting off those little particular beeps is useful to stay on the path of greater presence and focus. Now I realize, we have a few key people we need to stay in touch with, like whether it's our kids or our spouse, but you can set up that as well on your phone to a special ringtone, so it's somewhat important and someone important that you need to contact sooner rather than later. So to do those changes, it's very simple. You can go to your notification settings and just shut off your notification and beeps by simply just going to that part of the phone, and you can just shut it off. And if you need more information, you can Google how to change notifications on your phone, iPhone or Android, or simply, the reality is just ask a teenager. They'll help you. They are so efficient. It's not even funny, and that. This leads me to the next tip. Constant bombardment of messages by staff that may not be urgent and should really wait for an appropriate time. One of the key stressors for people for not achieving success in their professional life is not setting up clear boundaries and parameters at your work, and according to your work style. And when we don't set up our clear guidelines, that's when we are subject to other people's agenda and demands and what they feel is important versus what we may believe and know to be important. So it really is our responsibility to set up good, clear guidelines and make explanations to our staff. So simply telling them, if it's really important, please come and get me right away. But if you think it can wait for a later time in the morning or at breaks, that's best, so that they know what your expectations are. Because if you don't tell them, they're not going to really know. So once I started doing that and creating that, expectations, it just made the workflow so much easier for me. Now, as I mentioned, I like to make sure I time block things, such as administrative duties, paperwork, so that I can focus and give my full attention to the patients when I'm in clinic. Because when I'm with the patients, I want to be at my best and I want to give them the highest priority and service that I can. And now that process usually works well for me. And and it has worked well for other colleagues who schedule that. And I find that, female colleagues, they seem to really, they inherently do that more. And I think that maybe because they just don't keep their phone on them the way guys do. So and they are really effective. They're especially the female colleagues I've worked with. They really seem to be they give their patients presence and they're really good. And when I'm talking to them, they really seem to be focused and attentive. If you don't set those guidelines, other people will just in the circle of care with the patients, they'll simply, they'll come in and say to you, "Hey, do you have a minute?" Or it'll just take a minute. But in my experience, nothing really just takes a minute, and things can get stretched out very long. Now, if something really does take a minute, then let's find out the right minute that works for both of us. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule. As you know, we certainly need to be a bit flexible but sometimes too much flexibility can also lead to chaos and no organization. Note, I usually set my time blocks like 20 to 30 minutes in the morning before I start the day in the clinic. And I also end the morning to deal with the messages, emails that need to be addressed. I'll do also a mid-afternoon time block and then at the end of the day. And so if I need to be out, say, by 5 p.m., I want to stop having any patient encounters for at least 30 to 45 minutes prior to dealing with phone calls, questions, emails that have to deal with any patient care issues or administrative issues. Scheduling these buffer zones are important so you don't feel stressed. And if you don't schedule it, it just won't be done. Setting the right environment makes it easy to control unwanted distractions, which really are the micro depleters of our ability to do well. And they create little micro anxieties throughout the day. I don't want to give the impression that technology is all bad. In fact, it can be a great ally to serve as a reminder to, get up and walk, to go outside, get some fresh air and sunlight, the things that really enhance our energy. Now, if you have a smartwatch or you can get an app on your phone, that's just as easy. Or simply set your clock timer to beep at certain times to remind you to get your micro energy boosting activities in. One of those activities that is very helpful is to take 1 minute to close your eyes and take some deep breaths. 1 minute several times a day has such a huge positive impact overall in terms of your health, productivity, and the way you interact. And if you don't think you have that 1 minute time, it really amounts to 8 to 10 nice deep breaths it only takes 1 minute to do 8 or 10 deep breaths. It's also useful to close your eyes because as you know, we spend so much of our day looking at computer screens, and we have this constant bombardment of this low-level UV radiation that's just coming right at us all the time. So our eyes actually need to take a break. Also, because of the constant blue light that is being emitted from the screens, it's useful to blink often. So, and you can also change your monitor settings to emit lower levels of blue light so your eyes don't feel as fatigued. I've done this on all my screens and it's just totally made a huge difference. In fact, I think one of the things that was bothering me the most was eye fatigue, and changing those settings and changing the way I was interacting with the monitor made a huge difference in my energy level, and I just felt much better. So you can change them by adjusting your computer monitor, or you can also change it on on the settings app on your phone or tablet. And as I said, if you don't know how to do it, ask a 10-year-old. They'll tell you how to do it. Also, if you're not lucky enough to do a little bit of walking as part of your normal workflow, it's useful to take a break to walk and stretch your legs. do some step ups, or one of the best things is really to get a stand-up desk. It's a great investment. Prolonged sitting is really just not good for our health, and prolonged sitting is actually considered, like to be the new smoking. One really good way to schedule some of these micro boosters is to schedule breathing or standing at the top of every hour, and you can do longer sessions at lunchtime. Because I'm sure, if you don't do it, if you don't schedule it, you just won't do it. That's the way it is. And once you schedule it, really guard that time preciously, as if you had to see a patient. Give yourself that daily gift every day. It'll just extend your level of energy, and it'll allow you to stay in the work that you do longer, and you'll just simply enjoy everything you do much better. And you also carry that good energy and vibe when you come home, or when you're in your recreational life, when you're playing with your friends, etc. So just remember that's just a really good, impactful way to boost your energy. Now, if you do a lot of standing or walking during the day and you're healthy, you can buy over-the-counter compression stockings, knee-high, with a very low-grade compression. I heard about this when I was a resident doing surgery. The young vascular surgical residents, they did this, and they were just not tired. And I was surprised when they actually used it. And then, so I started doing it, and I was amazed at how much energy I had. And I don't know about you, but when my legs are tired, the whole of me feels tired. And this is the best $30 or $80 investment that you could ever have. So think about that. If you really do a lot of walking or standing, get over-the-counter compression stockings, and it really cuts out the fatigue tremendously. And it's an advice I also, obviously I give that advice to patients as well, who are in their work environment. They're also doing a lot of standing and walking, but we can also apply that to ourselves. And I don't think many doctors initiate that little trick enough. So I would like to touch on one important energy enhancer, and that is the importance of starting our morning off with the right mindset. I've been so guilty of this, that the not starting off in a good way, and I also think the primary tendency people have is when they wake up is to reach over and grab their phone and check emails, texts, social media, etc. But when we do this, we really are dialing into other people's agenda and what they need and what they want, and not what you need and want as part of your greater purpose. So start your day and your agenda and prime your personal, mental, spiritual, and physical engine right by empowering yourself with and giving yourself that gift of a good morning routine by incorporating stretching, gratitude practice, and breathing. And if you've never done this before, just commit 1 minute or, even 15 seconds. That's what I did. Just start off waking up and ask yourself, what are you grateful for? And taking nice 8 to 10 deep breaths. And just start doing that consistently. And eventually you'll find that 1 minute will grow to 2 minutes. Then you incorporate stretching. And it's more important to establish that little micro routine, because that will really change the way you look at things. I started that about 4 or 5 years ago, and it changed the level of energy I had. And now essentially I do about 25 minutes of breathing, yoga, a little bit of, I always do a gratitude practice and journaling. I'll probably talk about that at some other point in a podcast. So much work in science has been done around gratitude, and that really changes the way you show up in the world. So doing this will increase your attentiveness to your energy and increase your awareness. Because, being present and attentive is really a state of increasing our awareness. If you think about the activities that you enjoy, the one reason you probably enjoy them is that you think or live in that moment of true presence. Time simply slips away. One reason I think people get so addicted to exercise is that they're just so present in the moment. And that can be said for many activities or hobbies, like, when you're climbing a mountain or rowing or fishing or playing soccer, football, hockey, or tennis or golf. There's nothing else that is distracting you when you're in that activity. You're connected in that point in time. Now, one reason I love performing magic or doing stage shows or giving a talk is because I'm so immersed in that moment. When I was doing big stage shows, I really had to be attentive to the illusion that I was performing and watching the audience, thinking what the next step is. And as a performer, you simply don't have room to think of other things, because if you do, that's when you'll screw up. And that certainly has happened to me, once in a huge way when I was performing. I wasn't performing a magic show, but I was hired to do a talk, and my father was undergoing treatment for throat cancer. And I was so worried about him and what was happening. My head just was not in that space, in the talk and the content that I was delivering. And one person in the audience who really knew me well said to me, you just didn't seem like your normal self. You said all the right things, but you just didn't seem like very present. I mean, is everything okay? You just didn't seem there. And people know that. They can sense when we're present and when we're not. And we may think we're fooling them, but the reality is they know. They know exactly how we are. You know that when somebody's not paying attention to you, and vice versa. So that's really key. So anyway, I'm sure we all have some activities that give us that state of pure immersion, that gives us this sense of calm. And it's useful to connect with those types of activities as often as we can, to train ourselves and to enjoy those moments of pure mindfulness presence. Taking this ability to increase our awareness helps us be more present and attentive. It's just like that old saying, we are human beings, not human doings. Now, the list of energy boosters and drainers are endless. But one last important concept I'll share with you is the importance of the input side of the energy equation. Specifically, what we put inside ourselves in terms of nutrition. And specifically, I'm going to talk about water intake. Our body and brain is made up of more than 65% water. So that means good hydration is key to optimizing our health. So if you're healthy and don't have any medical issues that require you to restrict your water intake, you should be drinking at least 3 to 4 liters of water a day. And if you drink coffee, tea, or pop, juice, or alcohol, you need to drink an equivalent amount of water just to be neutral. Because we need to clean the old toxins out. Because our brain, consists of like about 75% of water. And if your brain and body is in a fog, you just can't think straight, and you're just not more attentive, and you can't make insightful decisions. And one way I increased my water intake was by keeping a big glass of water at my bedside. And when I would wake up, I'd take a big drink, brush my teeth, take another big drink, and then shower, then take another drink after. And once I dressed, I'd take another drink. And by the time I reached the breakfast table, I was drinking about 750 to 1,000 milliliters of water before I started. And I was basically priming my brain and body to get that water in. Now, initially, I didn't get to 1 liters every morning easily at all. Actually, I was about 250 cc's, and that was the struggle. But I stayed with it. I carried that routine, and eventually the amount of water consumption just increases. Now, I'll also use natural triggers in my environment through the day. So when I get home, the first thing I do after I've greeted my family and I open that door, I'll go to the sink and I'll drink another glass of water. So use the natural cues in your environment to make that happen. And another thing, avoid heavy meals, especially meats at noon. You'll feel the decrease in energy in the afternoon. And ever since I learned about how heavy meals, especially meat at lunch, changes our energy flow, I stopped eating meat at lunch, and I just found I had more energy and clear energy right through the day. And it it just lasts. I just felt great. And anytime I ever forgot or ate a heavier meal, I would feel that 2-3 o'clock slump. I'd reach for coffee or something and just to pick me up, but it's not as sustainable. So just think about that when you're planning your lunchtime routines. So I hope this served you and that there was at least one tip that you can use. I'm sure for some of you that you knew many of these key points and that this was simply a refresher for you. Now, before I give you the summary, the next podcast is probably the most important concept I've ever shared with anyone. And it's so critical to everything I do that often I'll joke about that I would actually put that on my epitaph once I'm gone. So, check that out. I think that's a real important podcast that you can use, that concept that you can use in your clinical setting and also personally. So here is the summary of the podcast. Number 1, avoid multitasking. It makes you less efficient and drains you of energy. It also leads to cognitive decline and has a negative psychosocial impact on you and what you do. Number 2, monitor your phone use. Avoid alerts, notifications from Facebook, Instagram, news feeds, unnecessary people who text you. Those are energy depleters. Number 3, schedule time to check emails, texts, and phones. Use block time and guard that time. Number 4, don't start the morning looking at your phone and emails. You're dialing into other people's agenda. Start your day with your agenda and prime your internal mindset and spirit correctly. Number 5, try even taking a holiday from your device, whether it's for an hour or several days. Schedule those times regularly. We survived without them before they were invented, and we can certainly survive and rather thrive without them now. Number 6, learn to further increase your awareness and your ability to be present. It's a skill that can be cultivated. Get back to the activities that you really love and do, whether it's playing a musical instrument or walking or playing a sport. Number 7, breathe, walk, use a smartwatch, schedule it. If it's not scheduled, it won't be done. Number 8, use a stand-up desk and make sure you have a comfortable chair that you're sitting on. Number 9, hydration is key. Drink water regularly and use trigger points in your environment to help you. Number 10, don't overeat, especially avoid heavy meals at lunch. I hope this podcast served you in some way, or at least served as a reminder. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please share this with a friend or a colleague and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. And please don't forget to leave a rating. I know this seems like a small thing, but it really makes a difference in helping others find this podcast. I'm Dr. Lalit Chawla, and thank you so much for listening. Let's together make a greater and more effective community to inspire people to be their best. If you have any questions, comments, or any other interesting podcast ideas or concepts you'd like me to address, please send me an email and I'd be happy to connect with you. Have a great week.